Hello, Al Poulet.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Great to see you. Great to see you there with a crackling fire behind you. Your exhibition is called Untitled W at Wagner Contemporary in Sydney. And well, we're looking at you there with a fire behind you in your studio at Wedderburn. Tell us how you came to be part of that Wedderburn artistic community.
Yeah, certainly. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional people, custodians of the land, the Dharawal people, on which I'm talking today. I moved out to Wedderburn 2 years ago now, and into the studio of late Roy Jackson, who'd been here 40 years painting before I moved here. And it's got such a rich history in abstract painting with other artists such as John Peart and Liz Cummings, David Hawkes, Fred Bright, Joan Brazel, Fraser Bell. A lot of people have been associated with the place.
It's a fantastic community with a very long history, and some of those names you mentioned, including the late John Peart and of course Elizabeth Cummings, who's very much powering on and a neighbour of yours in the community. How has that sense of creative community affected you since you've been there for a couple of years?
It's been amazing. It's just so supportive. To have those older artists around you and see, it's possible to survive and even to thrive in your practice in a place like this. Liz is in a show at the moment at King Street Gallery called Kenwood Road, alongside John Peart and some of the other Wedderburn artists. And it's just so, it's really inspirational and humbling to be part of this.
When you say it shows that it's possible to thrive in that sort of environment, can you tell us a little, for those not familiar with Wedderburn, what sort of an environment it is? Because it's not an easy environment in terms of the surrounding bush and all of those things necessarily to function in. But as you say, you're thriving.
Yeah, it's got its daily challenges, but just having the space and the air to breathe. There's just trees. We're on 25 acres and next to the national park here, Dharawal National Park. And, there's koalas roaming around and we're just an hour from Sydney. It's amazing that the artists have been able to help preserve this bit of bushland. It's got the only koala population in Australia that doesn't have chlamydia. And so it's really healthy bush. And the depth of perception and feeling that you get living amongst the trees is just so different to the city. It's really informed my most current exhibition. Playing with that sense of foreground and background and feeling of place within the 2D span.
Well, let's go to straight away to some of the works in that current exhibition, and let's go to one first of all called Untitled Paths. And I can only imagine that there's been quite a bit of a process of exploration for you through the bushland environment around you over the last couple of years. To some extent, is that travelling, that finding paths, a common factor in some of the works in the exhibition?
Yeah, I think movement and action really inform my work. And a feeling of mark making is also creating paths. So you often see little animal tracks through the bush, and tempted to follow them. But yeah, it's that feeling when you're moving through the landscape, you're no longer an observer. You become a part of the place as you're, moving through it. So some of those paths are obviously physical, but a lot of them are more an inner a journey through these.
I know the concept of desire lines is one that's been important to you. You know, the things that propel people, or maybe even small animals on their pathways, on the trajectories that they follow. How do desire lines and the concept of desire lines affect how you travel through the landscape and what you see?
I think there are many layers to that question, because there are many desires playing on one's mind all the time, whether they're conscious or subconscious. So I looked into the derive of the psychogeographers such as Guy Debord, who sort of saw walking through the urban landscape as a way to escape it, to not have an aim in their walk. So it's often the sort of just subconscious things. So when I'm painting, it'll be a matter of having even the texture of the paint to create a tension with the other space, and this this desire to create tension is something that I often return to in the work.
So give us a little bit of a sense. You refer to space in your work and the space around that you're exploring. But one of the things that being in the studio of the late Roy Jackson has given you is a tremendous amount of space of your own to be able to work in. How has that working environment really changed your practice and your physical making?
So now I sort of have stages, different work stages. I'll work on a painting, and I work it as in sort of an action. I'll put in a few hours and I'll leave that work, and maybe that'll sit there for a few weeks, and I'll have separate paintings on the go at the same time. And this way the mark really has a chance to show itself, because I might not be happy with it initially, but over time you see things differently as the light changes through the studio. And yeah, it's just such a nicer process, right? So I can see them all at once, and
having that sort of studio to be able to work in, I'm assuming, is perhaps not something that you had the opportunity for on the same scale during the time that you were living much more in the city.
No, I spent a long time just working in sheds in the back of little houses in the inner west, and I was lucky to be involved in a few studios, the Mungo Mills in Summerhill, with some great artists. We had a lease off the developers and had this huge warehouse.
Let's go to another one of the works, so that we can actually explore the exhibition a little bit more. And again, the title of the work begins Untitled, and then it's Young Heart. You were talking about those multiple journeys, those explorations, and is what we're seeing here a kind of series of overlaid multiple journeys? That looks as though there's quite a complex grid going on.
Yeah, I really struggled with this painting. I repeatedly put more layers onto it, and as I was working with it, I kind of came to the realization it was similar to how my daughter and I have been at that time, relating to one another. And yeah, I just decided that painting was for her. So that's what I call it.
Hence the young heart component. So it's her young heart rather than yours, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Actually, I do have to ask you, because as the viewer who looks at the website, or of course perhaps goes to your exhibition in the flesh, will see all of the works are titled Untitled, but then with a title in brackets afterwards. Can you explain, what's the rationale behind that? Because it is a consistent practice of yours.
It just sort of came about naturally with the a lot of my favourite paintings were untitled, and there's a long history of abstract painting being untitled. So it's a sort of a nod to that history, but putting one in brackets just helps me to place the work mentally where I was at that time, and yeah, and just felt right to put a title there. So it might change.
Who knows? Unpredictable, no rules. Actually, you have said in previous interviews that that you don't approach the painting with any sense of rules. What happens, and you're. I hope, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, you're never quite sure where you're going to go. Yet there does seem to be, in this exhibition anyway, something of a consistency of kind of organic grids, matrices, even, as you said, those overlaid lines. How do you find the balance between that sense of it could go anywhere, but actually there's quite a consistency in the presentation?
They're just forms that I've built up over the years and lines that I'm drawn to. Gestures that create little realms, so I'll often paint over a layer, exposing underlayers to highlight different points in the painting. And also gesture is really important for me in the work. It's got to have a feeling of spontaneity and freshness in the work. Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of physically what it's like when you're painting? When you're trying to, when you are allowing that spontaneity and that freshness to manifest, are you very vigorous in the studio, or are they fairly considered marks? How does it physically feel?
Yeah, you got to be in the right frame of mind. So often when you're walking, you slip into that sense of being at one with all around you. I often found that with surfing too. When you're on a wave, you've got nothing else to focus on. You're very in the moment, and it was something that I was drawn to. So it's about just putting the mark down, and that's that unconsciousness, that mark, that moment when I'm not sure what it's going to be, and it's that unexplainable feeling that makes me repeat it every time, because I think, why did I do that? But in questioning why I did it, I lose that feeling. So it's that moment. It's very action driven, not always fast paced, but often mixing different line forms within the same work.
And what about the actual materials? You're using a variety of different types of paints. Tell us about those choices.
It's usually sort of I what do I do with the paints?
Well, you certainly seem to push them pretty hard sometimes. You know, you really make them perform whatever the paint is.
Yeah, I feel like a good painting is a good painting no matter what it's made of. It's like some of Tony Tuxton works were on newspaper, and they're some of the most amazing paintings I've seen. And I just try to balance something that'll be archival enough in the future with something that I can use paint on fast enough. So acrylic paint and rolls of canvas at the moment is where I'm at.
And there's spray paint as well, which has a completely different, slightly more amorphous feel.
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't have a certain form, and there's not that direct contact with the surface. So I only use it sparingly because I can't stand the smell of it. But yeah, it creates some great misty qualities, and it's really fast as well.
There is one of the works called Haze, which may not be a direct reference to the paint, but that sense of mistiness and haziness is certainly there. But when you were talking about that, you know, that sense of the gesture being really clear and really decisive and somehow right for the moment, there's also a work called Untitled, Clarity. Just speak to that for a moment. Is it what clarity are you referring to in that work?
There was a moment. So it was this basically a line painting where I overlaid both acrylic and aerosol over this canvas, and it just felt like it was moving. And after a few weeks of watching it move around, I just came in with a brush and put these dots right in the center, and then everything just sort of came together, and I just had this moment of clarity, and I thought this work just sort of shone in those few gestures of these dots, just really brought it together. Yeah.
So that sense of the kind of precise rightness somehow of the mark seems very important to you.
Yeah, it's just years of looking, but also it's just a feeling. Yeah, I'm not sure. Often I'm not sure if a painting's finished, so I have to let it sit and come back to them.
And sometimes when you do come back, it just needs those dots in precisely the right place to bring it to a conclusion. Let's go to another work quickly called Flow and Eddy. Well, of course, it's called Untitled first, but then Flow and Eddy. There seems a lot of movement there as well. But I also can't help asking, is it in any way a reference back to that fine musical couple, Flo and Eddie, from some decades ago?
They've got some good flows, and you know, sometimes they come on the studio stereo, but not directly to the musos, more to that period where it rained finally after all those fires, and I just got entranced with all these little creeks all of a sudden opening up within the bush. They're just little water trails all the way through. And there's an amazing creek in the bush here that flows all year round with really deep water holes in them. And they have these sort of circular motions, and I just really enjoy observing them and how they were marking the landscape. Yeah.
There is also another work in the exhibition called Untitled Rock Pools, and I wonder whether there's a reference there to those same waterholes.
Yeah, they're a constant place of inspiration. You know, I might get stuck in the studio, and I'll just head off, and it's about a 2-hour walk and you're just in the middle of total untouched bush, and this water's so fresh. It just pulls me down there. You know, I'm down there every second week. So yeah,
it sounds as though you have a very close relationship with the environment, a close appreciation of it as well. In 2018, you won the Paddington Art Prize, you know, one of Australia's most important landscape-related prizes. How influential was that prize-winning moment, and what did that allow you to progress to do?
Yeah, it really sort of spearheaded my trajectory that I've been on since then. I was able to put a roof on the studio. I didn't have a roof for a few weeks. So I put a new roof up, and allowed me to focus. Like, it gave me a good few months where I decided, you know, can I push this painting further? And it had come along just as I'd moved out here. I actually have a quote of John Pearce about landscape painting.
Yes.
And how he saw his painting. Can I share it?
Sure, yes. John Pearce was just a wonderful, remarkable man, and it was, you know, so sad that he passed just a few years ago in sad circumstances.
Yeah. So he says, "I see pictorial space as an inner landscape for the mind's eye to roam. So it is not surprising if my paintings evoke the feeling of landscape. I know it is a mental projection, but it is inherently delightful. While painting, I am issuing an open invitation for those illusions or allusions to enter. My conscious mind can be occupied with making, and the unconscious can come up with its own surprises."
Wonderful words, and they clearly resonate with you very strongly.
Yeah, definitely in that kind of confusion, because that always had that link between landscape and abstraction, and it interested me. But I think I'm definitely going down the more abstract road, and it just made total sense that that's why I'm doing it, because there's this relationship between inner and outer worlds that I'm exploring, and yeah, and it's great to know that other people have felt that way, and also had amazing paintings. Made amazing paintings.
Well, and as John did through his writing there, articulated it so well in words as well as the vision. The just going back a while, it's been a fantastic a really quite rapid evolution, in a sense, for you from the sort of video performance-oriented works that you were creating a few years ago, you know, very, very political, very powerful, to the type of choice of painting that you're now making. Do you see such a rapid evolution continuing? Are we going to see big change like that into the future, or do you feel as though you've found an area you're likely to stay in for longer?
I've always painted, even though I was making performance work, and it was somehow I was able through my studies to marry the idea of performance and painting, and justify in my process that painting can be performative and performance can be painting in a way. So I did these performances, like I filmed pushing my daughter around in a stroller and captured the shadows of the paths on the ground and the lines of the shadows, and it was shot at bird's eye view, so it looked like I was painting within the landscape.
Right.
which is sort of crossover period. I ended up making works out of found objects that I'd found on walks, walking being a very informative performance practice for a lot of artists and a great thing to do for people. But I created these objects, painting objects, and people had to negotiate the gallery in order to view them. So they became a part of the space in my thinking and my theory. So the paintings became more dominant in my work and just something that I totally fell in love with. Such a pleasure to be able to do that. And yeah, I just can't do enough painting now.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts about those paintings. And it's great to see in the exhibition at present what it is that you are doing in the journeys that you're taking with your paintings at the moment. So, Poulet, thanks for sharing your exhibition with us.
Thanks, Richard Morecroft. It was great to chat with you. Yeah, I really appreciate it.